Hi, now that the fabrication steps are done, I'm going to powder coat the enclosures. Powder coat is actually the easiest way to do a professional finish on the enclosures myself. When I shopped around for local places that would powder coat my first batch of pedals, I wasn't thrilled with the price quotes or the amount of time they said it would take. And while I did initially think that powder coating was something that would take a lot of equipment and skill, necessity made me take a closer look, and for something small like guitar pedals, it's really not too difficult. The equipment I need for powder coating is a metal rack of some kind, large enough to hang the enclosures from, a powder coat gun and an air compressor to spray the powder out over the enclosure, and an oven large enough to hold the enclosure, able to heat the part to about 450 degrees. I also want to be in a well-ventilated area using a respirator and eye protection. Powder coat starts as a really fine powder, hence the name, and getting that into my lungs or eyes is going to make for a very bad day. I'll talk a little more about how powder coating works later, but first, the enclosures need to be prepped. It's extremely important to get all the oils off the enclosure and then keep them that way leading up to the powder coating. I didn't film any of this because it's kind of like watching someone do the dishes. But basically, I begin by simply using a mild soap and warm water to get the loose dirt and oils off. Then I use mineral spirits to wipe down each enclosure with a lint-free cloth. This way, all oil, dirt, and soap is removed onto the cloth, and the cleaner evaporates from the surface without leaving any residue. The last part of prepping applies to cast aluminum parts. Gases can be trapped within the pores, and when the enclosure becomes heated, the trapped gases get released. That's known as outgassing. By heating the enclosures to 450 degrees, for roughly 30 minutes, I can get any outgassing to happen that would have occurred later when I bake the powder coat on. To hang these up, I use hobby wire. For reasons I'll share in a second, you must use a metal rack and a metal hanger. I also take this last opportunity to use compressed air to get any foreign matter off of the surface. When hanging a part with hobby wire like this, I want the hanger to create a bit of an oval shape to reduce the Faraday cage effect. That effect makes it more difficult to deposit powder onto two surfaces that are very close to each other or into corners. But I may be getting a little ahead of myself talking about the Faraday cage effect, so I need to talk more about how powder coating works. The powder isn't simply sprayed onto the enclosure, it's also electrically attracted to the metal. When expelled, the gun's emitter positively charges the powder. A clip from a ground source is attached either directly to the part or to the metal rack. The positively charged powder is attracted to any metal that's grounded. For a short time after, the powder is loosely bonded to the enclosure, but it can be taken off simply by blowing air onto it or bumping into it. So I have to be careful once it's applied. That's also beneficial because if I mess something up, I just blow the powder off and start again. To start coating, the compressor is set very low, somewhere between 5 and 10 psi. There's normally going to be an activator, which charges the emitter on the gun. This model has a handheld activator. With the activator depressed, I begin spraying the powder onto the enclosure in a circular pattern. I don't want to apply too little or too much powder. Too little, and then when the finish bakes, parts of the metal can be seen underneath. Too much, and I'll get extra buildup in areas, especially around the edges. As I put powder on, I watch for that moment where I can no longer see any color change to the surface. Then I'll spray over it just a couple more times. There's a couple other things I have to keep in mind. I try not to put the gun too close to the enclosure when it's charged. I stay back 4 to 6 inches. If I get closer than a couple inches, the gun's emitter and the grounded enclosure will arc. That'll disturb any powder already deposited on the surface, and when that happens, I'll have to start over. Now I'll unclip the wire and carefully transfer the enclosure to the heated oven. It might surprise you, but this is just an ordinary affordable toaster oven, which is the perfect size for powder coating metal enclosures. The only thing is, once you use it for powder coating, you can never use it for food. So I label the surface with a permanent marker so that mistake is never made. The amount of time it takes to cure in the oven depends on the powder. This one says 400 degrees for 10 minutes, but the 10 minutes should start only after the part reaches 400 degrees. The best way to check the part's temperature is with an IR thermometer. While it may look as though I could put more petals in here at one time, the issue isn't the space inside the oven. It's the parts being too close together when coating due to the pitfalls of the Faraday cage effect. After the enclosures are out of the oven, they take about 10 minutes to cool enough to touch. At this point, the piece is finished and I can handle it safely. That's one of the advantages of using powder coat, how quickly I can go from bare metal to a finished part. But the best advantage is how durable and attractive powder coat finishes are. Once these are all finished up, I'll do the silk screening for the text and the artwork, so join me for that soon.